So I want to begin this morning's Bible teaching by stating the obvious. Life is good until it isn't. Most of us in this church know exactly how it feels to be in a situation where out of the blue you have to begin picking up the pieces of a broken life. And of course the terrifying thing about picking up the pieces is that you're never quite sure if you're going to be able to pick up enough of them to make something out of it. When your life stops being good, you find yourself scrambling around trying to salvage something, trying to put yourself back together. And all the while the thought goes through your mind, if maybe this is it for you. Maybe you're beaten. Maybe this time you're not going to get up. Maybe this time all the king's horses and all the king's men won't be able to put this particular Humpty Dumpty together again. And so this morning, as we carry on working our way through the Gospel according to St. Mark, I want to talk about the importance of resilience. Now, I know that for some of you, this talk will have an immediate relevancy, because right now you're taking on damage. And almost every day you wonder how you're going to cope and what you're going to do. You look at all the pieces you're trying to pick up, and you're not sure if you can keep going. For others of you, this talk does not have an immediate relevancy, because right now everything's still pretty good, and that's great. But listen anyway, and store it away in your head, because one day you'll probably need this. According to the Harvard Business Review, resiliency is one of the new skills required in the marketplace, because surprise and disappointment are the new normal in our lives. So this is one of those Rocky Balboa types of teachings from the Bible. You know, it's not about how hard you get hit, but how hard you can, it's not about how hard you can hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep going. There's something inspirational and comforting about people who can hack it. People who can be bloodied but unbowed. And this matters, because we all have people in our lives who need us to be inspirational and comforting. So in this morning's episode, both Jesus and a woman do something that they shouldn't do. And that sounds salacious, but it isn't. It's just a heads up that this story will remind us that what other people think you should do isn't as important as what you should do. Everyone else is an expert on your life. And that's particularly true when your life stops being good. You noticed that, didn't you? When you went through that problem, all of a sudden you were surrounded by geniuses who knew exactly what you should do to fix whatever it is you were going through. And in this story we're reminded that the opinions of other people are sometimes unhelpful. We should focus less on what they think of us and focus entirely on whatever it is we need to do to survive. So Mark chapter 5 and verse 21, we read that Jesus crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, and a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. So in this sentence, the biographer is telling us that even before Jesus sets foot on the beach, a large crowd of people are there waiting for him. And they're there for a reason. In all likelihood, these events are happening in Capernaum. And at an earlier stage in Jesus' career, he had developed something of a reputation in Capernaum as being a miracle worker. If Mark is to be believed, and in all historical probability he ought to be, everyone in Capernaum knew at least somebody whose life had been changed because of an earlier miracle of Jesus. So if you live in the ancient world, in a superstitious culture, and a miracle worker shows up in a boat, what sort of people do you think are going to be there on the beach waiting for him? People who need a miracle. So no one in this crowd on the beach are doing well at the moment. All of them are picking up the pieces, trying to make something out of a life that used to be so much better but is now damaged and broken. They're all trying to make the best of something. For many of them, life used to be so good until it wasn't. This explains why in verse 22 we read that one of the synagogue rulers came there, Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and said, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Now, to understand the nuance of this story, you have to understand that this man would have been one of the most important men in his community. He was the Rosh HaKnesset, the head of the synagogue. To get to this station in life, he would have been successful. He would have been well educated, well respected. He would have walked and talked and carried himself with an air of earned importance. And I mention that because, as many of you have discovered, tragedy and disappointment are no respecter of persons. When it strikes, it doesn't matter how great everything else is. This man's successful. He's educated. He's respected. None of which now matters, because his little girl is dying. So he's in that spot where his amazing life is totally consumed by a single pain. And I know that those of you who are parents can relate to this particularly. Remember that time when your child was having a problem. As soon as you became aware of that problem, it didn't matter how much you earned. It didn't matter how happy you were, how well everything was going in your life. All that mattered, all of a sudden, was your child and the problem. So Jesus is feeling this, just like we are. And he immediately agrees to go with this worried father, I imagine to his relief. However, with not a moment to spare, Jesus has to spare a moment. In verse 25 we read that a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. So this woman is just one of many people with a problem on the beach. And just because everyone else has a problem doesn't mean that your problem isn't a problem. And I mention that because when we talk about being resilient in life, we're not talking about ignoring problems. On the contrary, resilient people tend to be very proactive. It doesn't matter how big the problem is or how crippling the trauma. They know that their situation can improve if they just work on it, if they just try something. And for this woman, her just deciding to leave her house and show up on the beach with everyone else is her way of working at it. It's her way of doing something, of doing anything that might just make her life a little bit better and might make her difficulty go away. She knows that other people in the crowd have problems of their own. She knows that. She knows, for example, that a very important person in her community has a problem with her daughter. And she's very aware that that man's problem is far worse than her problem. But that doesn't change the fact that she's got a problem. And you'll notice that her problem has to do with what Mark, as a first century male, rather obliquely calls bleeding. This is probably prudish ancient talk for some kind of menstrual difficulty. And as is often the case in life, this difficulty in one area of her life spilled over into all the other areas of her life and caused her a comprehensive set of problems. You've noticed this yourself, haven't you? You've got this one issue in one area of your life. But it's not confined to this one area. It spills over into your finances, it spills over into your relationships, spills over into your morale, into almost everything. So this woman's physical difficulty has created all sorts of others as well. For example, how would it be if we did church like this every week? I think this is actually a good idea. How about we have someone at the door as a gatekeeper, and they have a clipboard, and we ask questions. So, how you doing? Nice to see you. Welcome to church. Did you read your Bible this week? No, really? It's only middle of January. You gave up on that resolution already? Okay, good. Prayers, you say your prayers this week? Swears don't count? No? Okay. Did you swear this week? Which ones? Okay, that's good. How many Hail Marys? Any Hail Marys? No? Cigarettes? No? Still on that? Okay, good. And based on your answers, we decide which cinema to put you in. Right? The good people, who are religious enough for us, according to whatever standards we make up, they get to be here in the comfy seats. The other people, whose answers we didn't like, they're in Cinema 4, on the benches, out of sight and out of mind. This was exactly the religious world in which Jesus lived and operated. Some people were thought to be clean and therefore acceptable. Other people were thought to be unclean and therefore unacceptable. Now, here's why I mention that. According to the Torah, the rule book that Jesus lived with, this woman with her bleeding difficulty would have been regarded as perpetually unclean. So, for example, there's a really horrible line in the Torah, written by a man, we have to say that these days, written by a man, and it says this: when a woman with a discharge of blood for many days at a time other than her monthly period, or a discharge that continues beyond her period, she will be, let's say it together,
unclean.
Any bed that she lies on during her discharge will be
Unclean.
anything she sits on will be
Unclean.
whoever touches those things will be. How does this woman feel about herself? She walks around her community feeling wrong, feeling like she doesn't fit in, feeling like she doesn't belong in all the places where polite, respectable people go. She can't be with friends. She can't be with family. She can't be anywhere where she might get any kind of support for the things she's going through. To get the picture, she's got this one problem in her life which is bad enough, but the effects of that problem are not just physical and medical. She's socially ostracized. She can't be seen in public. And according to verse 25, she's had this particular issue for 12 years, which in her case makes her resilience all the more remarkable, does it not? Because when you go through stuff, one of the things that helps you bounce back quickly is friends. The more friends you've got, the more people you can talk to, the more buddies you can have a beer with and just hash it out and say what's on your mind, the better you'll cope and the quicker you'll bounce back. We know this to be true. This woman has had none of that. She's been on her own, facing her issues for 12 years. I admire her because she's still on the beach, still looking for a solution, still keeping going. In the next sentence, we additionally read that she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors. So, again, this is the ancient world, right? And if you have a medical problem, you'll do anything and anything to get better. And you'll start out to go. You'll see your family doctor. That'll be your first port of call. And then you'll go and see specialists, and you'll do all the things you're meant to do. And if none of that works, who knows where you'll be in 12 years? You might be taking medical advice from Gwyneth Paltrow. Right? Don't know if you followed that story this week. And that's where this woman was. She did everything she was meant to do, and none of it seemed to work. Now, in the ancient world, the advice of medical specialists regarding gynecological problems ranged from the sublime to the ridiculous. For example, there's a really weird paragraph in the Talmud that advises women who have this issue to drink wine mixed with rubber, aluminium, and garden crocuses. I know. And apparently this strange mixture made you vomit instantly. And the thinking behind this medical advice was that you would vomit out whatever it was making you ill. Weird. There was another text that we found from the ancient world that advises people with this issue to eat raw Persian onions. I think the thinking behind that advice was that it wouldn't fix your issue, but it would make your breath smell so bad that no one would come close enough to notice that you had an issue. So it was kind of like a lose-win situation. So you understand what Mark means here when he says that this woman suffered a great deal under every crank in town. She tried every counsellor there was, and they all took her money, but she didn't get any better. Seemed to get worse. You further understand what this text means when it says that in her suffering she spent all that she had. Now she's not just sick, she's broke. So over a 12-year period she's exhausted everything. Her energies, her wealth, and lamentably we're told that instead of getting better, she was getting worse. So she's desperate. And when you're desperate, you'll try anything, which is good. That's still good. Because trying things gives you hope, however crazy it is. And hope gets your head out of the past, it gets your head out of the present, and it points you towards the future. It allows you to believe, however slender it is, that maybe one day things can get better, that they won't always be like they are today. So although it's a shame for sure that she blew all her money on every crank in the village over the past 12 years, and although it's a shame that she spent everything she had trying to get better, it's still good that she's on the beach, trying, holding on to hope. And now she's going to try Jesus. So in verse 27, Mark tells us that she heard about Jesus. In other words, she heard about his ability to heal people. She probably heard about people in the village who on his previous visit he seems to have helped. However, unlike the synagogue ruler who can just walk up to Jesus and ask for help, she can't do that. She's not good with people. She's lived on her own for 12 years. She's convinced she's unclean. She's convinced she's not good enough. She probably can't string a conversation together without stammering. She's very bad, very insular. So surreptitiously, she approaches Jesus from behind, touches his cloak. Her reasoning is, if I just touch him, I will be healed. So we understand this then by understanding that she spent 12 years of her life convinced that she's morally, religiously, and spiritually unclean. Almost certainly has no friends. Almost certainly has no family. She's not used to being in crowds. And furthermore, if the people in this particular crowd find out who she is and what her problem is, they're going to be rather disappointed with her. So she's thinking, I'll just sneak up. I'll just get the thing I need and I'll go and no one needs to know I've even been here. In the ancient world, people believed that important figures had an almost magical power that could be accessed by being close to them. For example, it was said of Alexander the Great by Arrian that crowds ran to him from all sides, seeking to touch his clothes, hoping to be baptized in his aura and his power. This woman's thinking of Jesus in this kind of magical way. She thinks there's something special about him that I'll get just by touching him. And it says on the screen that she wants to be healed, but the actual word that Mark uses isn't healed. The word that Mark uses is salvation. She doesn't only want her bleeding to go away. She wants to be saved of everything in her life that spoiled it. She wants friends again. She wants to know how it feels to be in company, to have a conversation, to feel like she's not alone in this cruel world. She wants all of it. She wants a better life, and she thinks Jesus can give it to her. So she does what she shouldn't do, and she touches Jesus. Now I find inspiration in her tenacity. For 12 years, she's been picking up the pieces. No money, no friends, no hope, no future. For 12 years, she's been struggling. And there's value in the struggle. Remember what Thomas Paine said. I don't know if they taught you this in school. Thomas Paine said, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. I love the man that can smile in trouble. that can gather strength from distress and grow. We don't think like that in our culture anymore. We think that we can be in control of everything, and we forget that we can't. We don't get to control a lot of what comes into our lives and our families. And when it all goes wrong, and when the sky turns dark, we think that that's a sign we should feel sorry for ourselves and complain. And so I like this girl. I like that she has character and grit. She keeps going for 12 years. She doesn't care what anyone thinks about her. And why should she? It's her life. She doesn't care how hard it's been thus far. And why should she? It won't help. She doesn't care about how undignified she looks picking up the pieces all these years. And there's no way to look dignified while you're picking up the pieces of a broken life. She only cares about struggling on and struggling on and struggling on. And it sounds horrible and it sounds unwelcome, but it's so noble. It's so necessary. Today on the beach, I will not give up. Today on the beach will be one more day in my life where I didn't quit. It will be one more day in my life where I refuse to succumb to the despair that came on me all those years ago, and I will keep on going, believing that somehow, something I do will eventually make a difference. I like this. Anyway, so she touches Jesus, and we read that immediately her bleeding stops, and she feels in her body that she's been freed from her suffering. Next sentence. At once Jesus realized that power had gone from him. He turned around and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Now, considering her social stigma, Jesus' response is remarkable. She wants to hide. Jesus wants to say hello. When life stops being good, our natural inclination sometimes is to hide away. For example, a few years ago when I went through a rough patch of my own, I'm not embarrassed to tell you this now, I was scared to go shopping. Does that sound weird to you? I was scared to go into a place like Walmart because I was terrified. I don't know, I might meet someone that I knew, and I was too embarrassed to face that. And this is quite a common response that we have when life gets difficult. Although we need people, we don't want people. Although it's helpful to be around people, we want to push them away because it's just too embarrassing to face it, in case they ask questions or you know, who knows. I think we think that way because in our culture we've gotten the idea that it's not okay to not be okay. It's not okay to be going through things. We believe that we have to keep up a facade of perfection. You know, we have neat lawns, we have tidy cars and immaculate homes, and we like to give the impression all the time that we have everything together. That's who we are. We're people who have everything together. And we don't get sad, and we don't have issues, and we don't have disappointments, and we don't have things we're going through, because we can cope. We have our stuff together. Other people might not, but that's not us. We have things together. And when it stops being good, we feel that we should be embarrassed about that. But the embarrassment doesn't help, does it? What good does our embarrassment do us? So Jesus is like, no. I know you saw me and I saw you. You want to sneak away, but you're not sneaking away. We're saying hello. We're having a conversation. We're talking about the issues. So the woman, she comes and she falls at his feet. Then look at the last few words in that sentence. Trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. Not just what she just did, but the whole last 12 years. All of it. All the details, all the embarrassments, all the struggles, all the pains, all the lonelinesses, all of that stuff. It just came out. That can't have been easy for her to do. She spent 12 years hiding, scurrying around out of sight and out of mind, convinced she's unclean. Every time this poor woman left the house, she'd have figured out some routine of how she could get what she needed to get without seeing someone that would ask her a question. She'd have timed her visits to the grocery stores for half an hour before closing time because she figured out that was the best chance she had of not seeing anyone. And now she talks. And it's good to talk. I hope you have someone like that you can just go for a pint with and talk. We have therapists in our culture. Do you know what we used to have? We used to have mates. We used to have mates so we could just talk. How you doing? Ah, rubbish. How's that? Just blah, blah, blah. And you talk. Now we have to pay $150 for it. I hope you have mates. And if you don't, I hope you can find some. Then Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." She was trying Jesus. It turns out she was actually trusting him. "Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now, it's easy to think that you can bounce back from your problem if your problem is a one-day problem. One-day problems are simple. 1 week problems are simple. 1 month problems are simple. But it's not so easy when they're longer. This woman has had a 12-year problem. She spent 12 years bouncing back. And at many points along that 12-year journey, she would have felt like giving up. And that is exactly why her story matters. And I think that's exactly why Jesus is so impressed with her. It's not just that she did that weird thing with touching the cloak. It's that she found the tenacity to be on the beach that morning in the first place after 12 years of not quitting. I think that's why Jesus applies the faith word to her life. Sometimes we need to realize that when life gets hard, the bravery of one inspires the bravery of others. Do you know the line that most frequently appears in citations for the Victoria Cross? It goes like this: "These actions were an inspiration to all who saw them." That's the most frequent line in Victoria Cross citations. These actions were an inspiration to all who saw them. If you can go through your disappointments well, that will inspire those around you. Never forget that when you're going through it, people are watching how you go through it. And therefore the manner in which you go through it matters. Ease inspires no one, but dogged perseverance in the face of adversity inspires everyone. And I'm sorry to be unsympathetic. I don't know everything that you're going through, but listen to this. Your children, I'm sorry about your problems, but your children, they need you to go through it well. They need you to cope with adversity well. Your friends, your colleagues, your family, everyone in your life needs you to dig deep and find the strength and the courage that you require to make it just a little bit longer. We despise our struggles, fair enough. We wish to be freed from them, fair enough. but there is nonetheless value in the struggle. I have never admired a single person who lived an easy life. I may have been jealous of them, but I've never admired them. The stories that I like, the stories that I celebrate, are the ones where the hero has obstacles to overcome to get the life he or she wants. And that is exactly why I admire so many of you. Every day you get up and you overcome. And in the absence of perfection, you do the best that you can to live the best life that you can. And it is not just admirable, it is Christian. And I applaud you for it. I admire you for it. There is value in your struggle. Any questions in any of that? I can't see a single thing. Which is great for me. My church experience just got better. Any questions? No? Good. Okay, let's pray. Bless us. Keep us and our families safe. Protect us. Save us from our adversities and our pains and the things that spoil us. Make our plans to prosper. And while we await your help, we crave your strength and rely upon you in faith, believing that hand in hand with you, we can keep on going and keep on being strong through Christ our Lord.